The artillery barrage had been relentless for 3 hours. Private First Class Maya Chen lay flat on her stomach behind a low stone wall. Her designated M24 sniper rifle, a weapon she had barely qualified on, resting uselessly beside her designated M249 squad automatic weapon. She was the unit's machine gunner, a role that required suppressing the enemy with heavy, sustained fire, not picking off targets with precision. She was here to provide the thunder, not the lightning. Her arms still ached from hauling the heavy weapon and its ammunition through the mountainous terrain for the last 3 days. Her squad, part of a larger reconnaissance mission, had walked straight into a well-prepared ambush. The enemy fighters, hidden in the tree line on the opposing ridge, had let the lead platoon pass before springing the trap, effectively cutting them off from the rest of the battalion. Now, they were pinned down in a shallow, rocky basin, with her squad providing cover for the platoon leader, a young lieutenant, who was trying to establish communications and coordinate a counter-attack or retreat. The air was thick with the smell of burnt gunpowder and kicked-up dust. Every time one of their soldiers tried to move, a fresh volley of enemy fire would snap and crackle just inches above their heads. Chen's job was simple: keep her head down and wait for the order to lay down a base of fire so the others could maneuver. She was backup, pure and simple. The designated marksmen in the unit, the ones with the scoped rifles, were further up the slope, trying to find a better vantage point, but they were just as pinned down as everyone else. Through a crack in the rocks, Chen had a narrow, almost useless view of the battlefield. It was a mess of smoke and dust. She could see the muzzle flashes from the enemy positions, hundreds of meters away, dancing like fireflies against the dark green of the forest. She tracked them idly, a habit born of boredom and fear. Her job was to shoot a lot of bullets in their general direction, to make them keep their heads down, not to actually hit anyone specifically at this range. Then she saw it. A flicker of movement, different from the rest. It wasn't a muzzle flash, but a glint of metal, like a scope or a pair of binoculars catching the late afternoon sun. It was high up, in a cleft of rocks that overlooked the entire basin, a position so perfect it would command the entire area. If an enemy sniper or spotter was setting up there, they would have a clear, unobstructed view of the lieutenant's position. They could call in mortar fire or simply pick off the command element one by one. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She tried to get the attention of the squad leader, Sergeant Jensen, who was crouched behind a boulder 10 meters to her right. But the noise was deafening, and any shout would be lost. She watched, frozen, as the glint of metal steadied. They were setting up. She could see a shape now, a man, settling into a prone position. He wasn't just any fighter. He was a professional. His movements were calm, deliberate. He was aligning his scope, zeroing in on the command post. In less than a minute, he would start shooting, and the lieutenant, the radio operator, and everyone around them would be dead. The platoon, leaderless and cut off, would be annihilated. Chen looked at her M249. It was useless for this. Firing it would just give away her position and kick up a cloud of dust that would blind her, allowing the sniper to shoot her with impunity. Her eyes fell on the M24 beside her. It was the backup weapon, the one they had given her just in case. She had fired it exactly 4 times in training, qualifying as a marksman only because of her steady hands, not because of any real skill. The scope was still zeroed from the last person who used it, a soldier from another squad who had been injured 2 days ago and had to be evacuated. She had never even looked through it before now. Her breath hitched. She had a choice: stay in her lane, do her job as a machine gunner, and hope someone else saw the threat, or do something that was absolutely, unequivocally not her job. She would be breaking every protocol. Machine gunners suppress. Snipers engage. If she took that rifle and missed, she wouldn't just fail to stop the threat. She would have exposed her position for nothing. But if she did nothing, people were going to die. The decision, in the end, wasn't a decision at all. It was a simple equation of consequence. She slowly, carefully, pulled the M24 towards her. The stock felt different in her shoulder, lighter, more precise than the brute weight of the saw. She shifted her body, wincing as a rock dug into her hip, and brought her eye to the scope. The The world exploded into a magnified, shaky chaos. She found the cleft of rocks easily, the glint of metal now unmistakable. There he was. The man was clearly visible, his face obscured by a shema, but his posture was textbook. He was adjusting the knob on his scope, his breathing slow and controlled. He was in no hurry. He was a professional, confident in his hidden position. Chen's hands were trembling. Her breath was coming in short, panicked gasps. Everything she had ever learned about shooting evaporated from her mind. Breathe. Steady. Squeeze. The mantras were there, but her body refused to obey. She tried to control her breathing, to slow her heart rate, but the thunder of the battle around her made it feel impossible. The man in the scope began to settle. He was ready. He was about to take his first shot. In that moment of ultimate pressure, something clicked. It wasn't calm that washed over her, but a cold, hard clarity. The fear was still there, a buzzing under her skin, but it was compartmentalized, pushed into a corner. Her world shrank to the space between her eye, the scope, and the man. She took a deep, shaky breath, let half of it out, and held it. The reticle was bouncing all over the place on his chest. She corrected, using the natural point of aim she had been taught, letting her muscles relax so the rifle would settle where her body naturally pointed. The crosshairs drifted down, past his chest, past his waist, and settled on a spot just below his pack, on the rock he was lying on. It wasn't the man she was aiming at, but the space he occupied. It was a trick an old instructor had mentioned once. For dealing with target panic, the man's finger tightened on his own trigger. Chen saw it. The slight tensing of his hand. She squeezed. The crack of the M24 was a sharp, clean sound, completely different from the throaty roar of her saw. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and for a terrifying second, the scope showed nothing but a blur of brown and green. She fought to bring it back on target. The cleft of rocks was still there. The man was still there. He was perfectly still, his head resting on the stock of his rifle. He wasn't moving. A dark stain was spreading on the rock beneath him. He had been in the middle of his shot, perfectly aligned. When her bullet had found him, she had aimed for the space he occupied, and in that space, she had found him. For a long moment, she just stared, her mind blank. The battle continued to rage around her, but in her small bubble of reality, there was only silence and the image of the motionless man. She hadn't even processed what she had done. She just watched, waiting for him to move, to prove it was a mistake. He didn't. A rough hand grabbed her shoulder, and she nearly screamed. Sergeant Jensen was crouched right next to her, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. "Chen, what the hell are you doing with that?" he hissed, his eyes darting from her to the rifle and back. He hadn't seen what she had shot at. He had just seen his machine gunner abandon her post to play with a weapon she wasn't qualified to use. Before she could even form a coherent answer, the enemy fire from the ridge seemed to falter, then stutter, then fall completely silent. The sudden quiet was more deafening than the noise had been. From the command post, a figure emerged, crouched low, but moving with an air of authority that cut through the dust and smoke. It was the battalion commander, a grizzled colonel named Morrison, who had been forward with the lead platoon when the ambush started. He was making his way towards their position, ignoring the danger. He walked right up to Sergeant Jensen, his gaze sweeping over the squad, taking in their positions, their weapons, their faces. He stopped when his eyes landed on Chen, still frozen, with the M24 in her hands. He looked from her, to the rifle, and then up towards the now silent ridgeline.